Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Vaughn Sports Madness, part 4 of 4. Gonna go again, just a little bit off script today. I had my agenda all drawn out for what we were going to cover today, and man, I've just kind of been all over the place. I think the only thing on the script that I actually had on the script to start was the first segment about the Preakness. Everything else has just kind of been as we go along, and that's okay. That's fine. Major League Baseball, Chicago Cubs got some good news today. Jason Hayward is only going to be out 3 to 5 days with a rib and hip contusion. There was some concern that he had done some real damage after going in hard after a fly ball outfield. He came up lame after that, and so there was some real concern there in Chicago Cubs camp. After the Kyle Schwarber injury took him out for the entire season, we're thinking, oh man, Jason Hayward, this is our big signing in the offseason for the Cubs. And, that the fact that he's only going to be out 3 to 5 days has got to be a huge relief for fans out in Wrigleyville. That's a big sigh of relief for them. They did take Game 1 from the Giants yesterday, 8-1 in that 3-game set out in San Francisco. I want to talk about something. I want to address it real quick. People talking about, we're 30 games into the season. People talking about, the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox are going to play in the World Series. Stop. Just stop. We're 30 games into the season. We are 30 games into the season. It is not going to be the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox playing for the World Series. Neither one of them are going to be in the World Series. So calm down. The Chicago Cubs are 5-5 in their last 10 games, and this is much more indicative of who the Chicago Cubs actually are. They came out of the gate 24-6 on an historic pace, and since then they're 5-5. The 5-5 Chicago Cubs are more indicative of who the 2016 Chicago Cubs are. They are not a 24-6 team. They are not an 800 team. They're not going to win 125 games. They're just not going to do it. They don't have the arms. They addressed some of the best. Last year, they made it to the League Championship Series with one arm and one bat. They addressed the bat issue over the summer. They're still just one arm. And, they're not really any different than they were last year. They will probably make it to the League Championship Series again this year, if they make it that far. They're a playoff team. Don't get me wrong. They're the best team in that division by a mile. They're 7 games ahead of Pittsburgh, 40 games in. That is accurate. They will win that division by probably 25 games. I don't see anyone even being remotely close to them. And if anyone's going to make a run, it's going to be St. Louis. It's not going to be Pittsburgh. So calm down, Pirates Nation. You don't have a chance either. It's probably going to be San Francisco or the Nats coming out of the National League. You got the Chicago White Sox, 25-18 right now. They are 2-8 in their last 10 games. They were 23-10 at one point. Almost right up there with the Chicago Cubs. People were like, oh, we're going to have a Chicago World Series. I hate the White Sox. I do. I hate the White Sox. But I'm also a sports analyst. It's my job to know them. And they're not a 23-10 team any more than the Chicago Cubs are 24-16. And I talked about all year long the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, 67-15. I said they are not a 67-win team. And that was borne out. Now, Chicago, neither are they a 2-8 team. Chicago's a 5-5 team. They will probably go 5-5 the rest of the season. They will probably win. They'll probably end the season. They'll push 100 wins. They'll push 100 wins this year. They're not a World Series threat. And I think what it is right now is you've got a combination. The Chicago Cubs have been in a drought for so long. 110 years since they've been to the World Series. With by far the most loyal fan base in all of baseball. No offense to Dodger Nation, no offense to Yankees Nation or Mets Nation. Chicago Cubs, hands down, the most loyal fan base. And if I had to say a number 2, I would say it's in that same division with the St. Louis Cardinals. They've got a tremendous fan base down in St. Louis. They're smart, they're knowledgeable, they know. That's why they didn't have any problem seeing Jason Hayward go to Chicago. They knew he wasn't going to do any better in Chicago than he did in St. Louis. The Cardinals knew the Cubs were not a threat to win the World Series. If the Cardinals knew that Chicago was going to win the World Series, they would have done everything in their power to hang on to Jason Hayward. Jason Hayward, as good as he was for St. Louis, they wouldn't have just let him walk to a division rival without getting anything in return if they thought for 1 second that the Chicago Cubs were a threat to win the World Series. They're not. The Cubs are not going to win the World Series. I said in episode 1, I am a lifelong Cubs fan. I'm a Cubs fan and I'm a Rangers fan. My dream World Series would be to see the Chicago Cubs and the Texas Rangers, which that's also not going to happen. Rangers had their chance. It's done. It's gone. Cubs are not a threat to win the World Series. They're not a threat to go to the World Series. They're not a threat to contend for the World Series. They're in contention to make the playoffs. They're the best team in the Central Division, in NL Central, and not much more than that. I'm looking. They have the best record in all of baseball by 4 games over Baltimore and Washington. And then they're 4.5 games ahead of Boston and 5 ahead of Seattle. Everything, though, in this early part of the season is so skewed. And that's what people are like, oh, well, X player, blank player for blank team hit 2 home runs in game 1 of the season. Oh, he's on pace to hit 320 home runs. Well, yeah, right now. Give him a week. He won't be on pace to hit 320 home runs anymore. Chicago, they're not going to finish the season. The Chicago Cubs are not going to finish the season playing 750 ball. They're just not. Their run differential is stupid through 40 games. It's ridiculous how much they are outscoring opponents. And it's not that they're outscoring them. It's that they're not allowing runs. The Cubs have allowed 116 runs this season. They scored 229, which is still pretty good. Their runs scored is 3rd in the league behind Boston and St. Louis. Both of whom I think are credible threats to make it to at least the league championships. Now the runs against, again, they're 1st in the league by 14 over Washington, another 10 over the Mets, and then another 8 over the White Sox. Before it kind of starts to gradually and incrementally increase. But yeah, 113, they're plus 113 through 40 games. That's one of the most ridiculous stats I've ever seen. And it's impressive. It is impressive. And, Chicago, if they're going to keep outscoring opponents by 4 runs a game every single game, well, then heck yeah, they're going to, they will win some games. And the Cubs are going to win some games. This Cubs team right now is not the Cubs team from years past. This is not the Cubs of the mid-'80s where if they won 60 games, it was time to go to Harry Caray's and get blitzed. These are not those guys. They have expectations of making it not only to the postseason, and this is where I will say for Chicago Cubs, they have changed for the better. The expectation now is, and it's expected, they're going to make the playoffs. The expectation is we're going to go to the league championship and we're going to go to the World Series. And this is the expectation now in Chicago. It's always been, well, there's always next year, there's always next year, there's always next year. And I kind of joked around with someone the other day. They lost 2 out of 3 to San Diego and then turned around and lost 2 out of 3 to Pittsburgh, maybe. And I was like, well, there's always next year. This Cubs team is not World Series good. They're just not. But the expectation is so different, and they're focused so much more than they have been in the past. And so as a Cubs fan, it's good to see. They look like and they act like they belong on the big stage. And they do. They do. They're a solid playoff team. So, if you're a fan of the Cubs like I am, it's good and enjoy it. And, I have a sneaking suspicion that it's only going to continue to get better. Theo Epstein took a team with a similar history out in Boston and made them perennial World Series favorites. He left there, came to Chicago, trying to do the same in Chicago. And I'll tell you what, if there are 2 fan bases that deserve to win, and I'm not one that says anyone deserves anything ever, but if there are 2 fan bases that deserved to win, one of them is the Boston Red Sox and the other is the Chicago Cubs. They have been through so much for so long, and they've been so disappointed that, the fact that the fan bases themselves no longer believe that they don't belong in that level, it just speaks volumes. So enjoy your season, Cubs fan. I know I am. Don't get carried away, though. And White Sox fans, just stop. Just stop. You're not even in the conversation. You're a game and a half up on Cleveland. You guys have a tough division. You've got the Indians, you've got the Royals, and you've got the Tigers all in your division. You also have Minnesota. Congratulations. There's 16 wins. You guys, and playing 500 ball at home, just calm down, White Sox fan. Now, calm down, Cubs fan too, because you're not getting there either. Chicago will kind of neutralize. I can see the Cubs staying on top of their division. I think Chicago will finish 3rd. I think Cleveland's also going to settle way down, and I think they're the 4th best team in the division. I do. So anyway, that show went absolutely nowhere near where I thought it was going to go. But thanks for coming along for the ride anyway. So until next time, I'm Hiram Vaughn, just reminding you that no amount of success can compensate for failure in the home. Make sure that you let your family know each and every day just how much you love them and care about them. Thank you, and until next time, God bless.